Okay, so to work in Photoshop Elements, to create the kinds of custom brushes and shapes that we're working on, first we'll need a new blank document. So Command N or File, New, gets us a new document. So we're going to go ahead and create one that's 8 inches square by 150 pixels per inch. I'll click OK, and there it is on its own layer. The Shapes menu is over here on the left-hand menu bar. You'll see there's a number of different tools. I'm going to use just the ellipse tool to make it really easy to start with. And I'm going to click and drag in my image. And then I'm going to maybe create a couple of different shapes here. And notice how when I did that, there are two shapes in different layers. So what I'm going to do instead is I want those in the same layer because I want custom brushes that are all together. So I hold down the Shift key, and that creates an additional shape in the same layer. You can see that over here. There's just one layer. So I'm going to do that again. There I'm adding to it. And I keep the Shift key held down. Okay, now I'm going to go back and I'm going to hold down the Option key, and that takes chunks out of it. So now my shape is a little different. Now I'm going to add back with the Shift key. And I've got just an abstract shape, and I'm going to add one more longer shape down this way. And now I'm going to hold down the Option key and slice away from it. Slice some chunks out of this guy. So the Option key takes away, the Shift key adds. Okay, now I've got all of those. It's kind of abstract, so I'm actually going to add some more to it, something I didn't teach you yesterday. So I'm actually going to take the Line tool. I'm going to continue to add to it. I'm going to hold down the Shift key. I'm going to click and drag to here. And I added a line in that same shape. I'm going to add another line and another line. So these are telescoping out, and this looks more like the work of an artist named Miro, early Miro, and also a couple other artists. So I'm adding some radiating spokes out from this one piece, kind of holding these other parts together. And I can actually control that line up here. So let's say I wanted a 4-pixel line. I can do that up here. Hold down the Shift key. It continues to add to it. And there's a big one. I don't like that, so I'm going to just press Command Z. Get rid of that. Okay, so now I'm going to make this into a custom brush. I like the abstract quality to this. The first thing I have to do on my layer menu is simplify the layer. Okay. So now I've simplified the layer, and now I need to select this chunk. So I'm going to use the lasso tool, select this whole bit, and then I'm going to go to Edit, Define Brush from Selection, and there's what my brush is going to look like. I click OK. Then I do Command D, that gets rid of the marching ants. I'm going to add a new layer here, a new blank layer, just so I can demonstrate what to do with that brush. So I click my brush tool. And I'm going to, there you can see my last brush. Click the brush menu. I'm going to drag down to the end, and there I see my custom brush. There it is. And that's what it looks like. And if I just click once, that's what that brush looks like. Do Command Z, gets rid of that. I can also make it grayer. If I lower its opacity, it's kind of a grayscale. And then they build up here. You can see the shapes build up. If I click the brush, this is where I can rotate it and squeeze it. Press return, and there's my different shapes. Okay, and then I can make it back to dark opacity, and now we're going to click in there. I can also do this with the eraser, so watch what happens when I click the eraser tool. I can also use my brush mode here, so I'm going to scroll down to my brush mode, and now I'm going to use the brackets key to make it a little smaller or larger. Oh, eraser tool. So now I've got a very large one, and I can also adjust the opacity. So here I'm going to erase it at 28%, but at that size, and see how it cuts that shape out. Now I'm going to make my bracket a lot smaller, go to 100% opacity of erasing, and it cuts those little chunks out. See how that works? And now, now the one thing about the eraser is you can't rotate it, but you can do some interesting things. Now I've built a series of shapes and forms. So now what I'm going to do, we're going to watch a video in a little bit. I might zoom in on here in just a second and go back to my brush tool. And I'm going to go to a lowered opacity. I'm going to shift it to the right hand leaning. I'm going to widen it back out. And I'm going to draw some in some horizontal planes and some vertical planes. I'm going to add up that vertical plane. Okay, there's a vertical plane, a horizontal plane, and where they connect, just some random chunks here. And here's a couple other custom brushes from earlier, like from yesterday. So here's one. Just pop that in there. And I'm going to swing that form around all the way upside down. And you can see it's adding some of those shapes that look kind of mountainous or castle-like. And I'm going to lower that way down size-wise. And you can see there's all of a sudden we're building some interesting shapes. Okay, so now I'm going to save that. Command S, April 21, abstract, found brushes. Click Save. And now I can start to do some interesting things with it. But I think for now, that's where we're going to start. What I'm eventually going to do is we're going to zoom in and look at the way these shapes come together and perhaps select just some chunks within there and work with those in a separate illustration. But that's how you can do that. And of course, with other layers, you could add a layer in the background with the gradient tool. Remember, we learned some things with the gradients earlier. And so here, I'm going to edit that gradient. I want some lighter color down at this end instead of black. So I'm going to click that. I want an orange color. I've got some pretty cool colors there. And I want a color here so it's kind of dramatic instead of white. I click that. I want a purple. There we go, a nice purple. So now I've got that nice gradient there. I click OK. And now I'm going to create that gradient in the background. And that does some interesting things. On my screen, you can see it does some interesting things with that in the background. And on this top layer, I can actually play with this a little. I can do multiply, or here is overlay. There it does some interesting things. You can see. So you can start to play with the layers a little bit. So I'm going to go back to normal. And then with this layer, I'm going to reduce the opacity so we can see the forms a little bit more underneath it. And it gives it, some interesting tone in the background. And of course, we can keep on adding layers and doing some interesting things. So I'm going to save it one last time and cut the movie.